Yeah.
Take this as a provisional for now. Better.
Okay, so much.
Should not go there.
Watch Cantala.
Sorry, I'll wait something better.
See, it's perfectly fine to me.
What?
Perfectly fine to me. Yeah.
If I take bread and I cut it and I spice it and all that other stuff and I toast it and make it into croutons, is this still a moti?
Yeah, if you break it up and let it sit 5 minutes in liquid before you,
Liquid?
or in the eggies or whatever, and then. We're gonna finish off today in Eretz Hashem Siman Tafin and Aleph to try to speak out some Ha'aros L'Maisa in the Mishnah Berurah and in the today's post game. We were in the middle last time with Sif Vav, and that's why we got cut off in the middle last time. So there we have a lot of discussion about using an Evan Meluban. This comes up throughout the Siman often, this question of Evan Meluban, that the idea of Evan Meluban is to take a hot stone, which today that would be, we wouldn't probably use a stone, we'd probably heat up a brick. There are those people that do that, they'll heat up a brick and will leave it on the open fire for a while until it gets really, we call it Meluban because it's like white hot, probably doesn't get actually white hot, but it gets very hot to the boiling point. And the point of that is to move it around the place that you're koshering in order to have like a portable Hagala going on. Places that really need Hagala as opposed to Iri, when you pour from a boiling pot, you're just doing Iri, it's pouring. Something really needs Hagala, Iri is insufficient. So those that are choshesh that one might need, let's say in a countertop or in a sink, to have that they're choshesh that we had real cooking going on in there somehow, then they would be machmer to use an Evan Meluban, which I mean taking boiling water and pouring it over a already hot brick and moving that brick around with some kind of a tongs or something. And it sounds, I've never done that before myself. It sounds a little bit complicated or maybe even a little dangerous, but maybe there are those that have developed that method. There are those that do that today. It's not that common. There are those that also that are machmer in their sinks. For Pesach, there are those who fill it up with hot water and then they put these immersion heaters into them that cause the water to boil up like I remember the old days we put in a cup of tea that boils up the cup. Personally, I'm knowing just to in the sinks, for example, for Pesach to take. I know myself personally, I know it's a little bit dangerous, but I take a very, very, very big pot of boiling water and wear thick gloves, and I start pouring it from the middle and pouring it all around and spilling it throughout all the sides, coming straight off the fire boiling. Some heads of kashrus organizations don't recommend that because A, it's dangerous, and there have been people that end up in the emergency room with burns because of that, because of the boiling water spritzes up, you can get in the face, you can get it in their body, so it's not really the smartest thing to do. Not everything I do is the smartest thing to do. But what they recommend is to buy one or two of the electric kettles. You boil up like a 1.5 liters or whatever it is of water in there. In about 4 minutes it boils, and you start pouring it into the sink from the middle. Start with the middle because it should really be dry when you pour it on it. So you start pouring it down the drain first. And then you start going around the drain, and you go in concentric circles around the drain with that water that had just boiled, and keep on going around and around concentric circles till finally you get to the walls. And in the walls, you start pouring side to side in a sideward motion, going upward till you get to the top of each wall. There are those that do that, which that's probably the most practical way to do it. And you have to just keep on refilling that kettle, because unless you have a couple of them, one can boil while you're using the other one, which should make it a lot faster than waiting each time in between. But you are allowed to kosher in stages, so it doesn't have to all be the one shot. It can be in stages. The advantage of when I pour the big pot of water is I really hit the whole thing all at once. But again, that can be dangerous. You have to be super careful to do that. That's with regards to the Evan Meluban. Those who do use Evan Meluban, there are those that even today will, in place of an Evan Meluban, will take an oven, an iron, and will take the steam coming out of the iron full blast and put the iron along all the areas all along the surfaces. It's an issue with the stink, and it's also an issue with the counter, because a lot of countertops, we often will put a davar gush down on them. We'll put something from a kli rishon, which is a davar gush, which is a solid piece, which has a din of not Irui, but a din of Hagala, because it's considered ishtamshus for kli rishon. Like you put the kli rishon itself was put on the countertop if you did so, or let's say if you boiled up noodles and the noodles were poured right into the into the sink or something like that, then theoretically you might have a real bishul situation going on where you would need not Iwuri, but you'd need real Hagala there. If the actual noodles went onto the sink and there enough noodles to be daragush, or hot rice, for example, would be a pot of hot rice that spilled into the sink, then that would be a daragush. So one would, in that case, ideally would use some form of Hagala in order to clean it out. There's another situation today, which is some do, which doesn't always work and has to really be tested out by a kashrus expert, or at least that someone has tested out that brand and a kashrus expert has given an okay on it, would be these steamers. There's a Hala Shaila and Halacha, later on it's mentioned in the Mishnah Berurah, but the poskim speak about it's a big major machlokes of poskim where there's steam in a place where you need Hagala if steam works to kasher. And many poskim are machmer that does not. There rise from the Gemara that doesn't. In the place where you need boiling water, the steam doesn't help because steam doesn't have the steam itself on its own right doesn't have the ability to suck things out like boiling water would if it was used with boiling water. So, but there are steamers today that not only do they produce steam, but it's a wet enough steam that it causes there to be a very thin layer of hot water coming off the steam onto the surface that you put it there. So these steamers are used professionally for various things, for cleaning the curtains on windows and so on and so forth, where it steams it out. And so if they're tested with a thermometer and they get to over 200 degrees, not inside, obviously they're boiling at 212 degrees, but they get over 200 degrees and as close as possible to 212 at the surface that the steam comes out onto. So then, and it creates a layer of water, a thin layer of moisture or water that stays on there. So then it's not just steam, that it actually is liquid, which is at boiling temperature. And that would be acceptable as we consider almost maybe even better than Iwuri. It might actually be considered like Hagala at that point. I myself did it this year with somebody who told me there was an improved machine, and I had very big doubts about it because I immediately took my hand off and I would feel that the surface really wasn't hot. So some of them might really need Sarach Iyun, whether they really work. But there are those that do work. There is somebody here in town who the Vod of Dallas has approved his machine, and he does it before Pesach for a price, and you pay him by the hour, and comes out and spends 2 or 3 hours in your kitchen and kashes it out with this steamer. So there is such a possibility today as well. Moving on to Sif Yud Aleph. We discussed in the past, and we'll just touch on it again, that the Shulchan Aruch says that a machvas, which today we call that a frying pan, which it says that you fry or yotzkin b'shemen lafoso, you pour shemen into it, then it's mutar b'hagala. And we already mentioned before from the Mishnah Berurah, and we see also from over here, that the machvah, the frying pan they're talking about then, is really more of a deep fryer than our frying pans today. So, and the Mishnah Berurah says that even if it's, now here the Mishnah Berurah does say that if you did start off with the full amount of shemen, it was like a deep frying, and then he says, Lo chashin and shemen is yabesh. We're not worried that it's going to dry up and the chametz is going to get baked there. Even if it does get burnt up, the amount of liquid of oil that's in there gets burnt up and it sticks to the walls. There's still a wetness which is there. There's still a certain amount of wetness there. Same thing would apply. The poskim say that if you have a pot of soup that has vegetables in it, and you cook that soup until you left it there too long, and it boiled out, and only vegetables are left. So in that case, Mishnah Berurah will still be saying that it's okay because there's still lachluchas, there's still some moisture there, which is interesting because the Mishnah Berurah already said previously, and we spoke about this last time, that if you have a kli which you just put a thin layer of oil on it, like a spit, that you put a little thin layer of oil, and then on that you put chametz, then that thin layer is not considered bishul, but rather it's considered hishtamshus al eish. So over here, once it gets burnt up, you don't have that thick liquid anymore. So why is that not hishtamshus al eish? So we're saying that the difference will be that there's still enough liquid, I guess, internally inside, as some explain. Then in the pnimius advarim, this is what the Shulchan Aruch Harav says in the Chazon Ish as well, that in the pnimius of Michael, within the essence of the Michael itself, since it was that type of Michael, that type of food that had, it was deep fried and there was a lot of liquid there, so then it still retains that nature, even though it might, for the most extent, dry up. That together with the svara that we keep on coming back to in Sif Vav, the Mechaber, that Mikra Din, we go back to Achar Rov Tashmisha, we go after the majority of the Tashmish. Since the majority of the Tashmish is used for bishul and not for burning dry, cooking dry, therefore we go after Rov Tashmisha, but siruf, in combination with the fact that it still has its moisture in it. However, a type of pot that's Rov Tashmisha is that it's supposed to it's pretty much dried out. For example, in the Rebbe Yashiv, it's brought B'Shem Rebbe Yashiv, when it's common in Yerushalayim. I don't know if you've seen it, but like you see a lot of in the old time simchas and Yerushalmi simchas, they would bring out the Yerushalmi kugel in this big, huge pot of Yerushalmi kugel, and that's what that pot is for. It boils a lot of oil, but it really always dries up and it turns into kugel. So it's never remaining a liquid type of thing. It's like a cholent pot, where it's supposed to stay cholent. Sometimes it might dry out more, but it still retains that liquid inside, and it's mainly being used for cholent with liquid, so it would need only hagala. Rabbi Yashiv says that it's a pot that's used mainly for kugel, which it always is supposed to be drying up, even though it started with a certain amount of oil. That would already need libun, would not be enough to have hagala. Now the shear of the mashke, of how much shemen, what's the cutoff point? There's considered enough shemen, there's considered bishul, and it's not considered just cooking on the fire. So the Shulchan Aruch Harav in Sif Lamed Vav in the Siman says that the shear is that the isa rocheshes bo, which means that it's like you have, let's say, a dough in there, and the dough is like it's like rocheshes bo means it's boiling in it. It's like shaking in it in the oil. It's like it's bubbling up. It's moving along with the bubbles, which it's a decent amount of oil, and that would be like the amount of oil, like obviously when you do sufganiyot or donuts and things like that. But even less than that would be enough that it's rocheshes bo. That's one of the types of pans that we had in the Beis Hamikdash. There was machvas and marcheshes. Marcheshes was that it was rocheshes, that it boiled up. It was like Rashi says there in Chumash, that it shakes. The food inside shakes from the oil that's in it. The Kaf HaChaim, which is one of the great Sephardic poskim, he says he's more makel and says that it's enough that the amount of oil in it is tofeach amanas lapiach, which means that if you would, it's enough that if you would touch the food afterwards, you've taken it out of the pan, you touch it onto something else, it would leave a residue of oil on what you touch. So that's quite a bit less than what Shulchan Harav is saying. And I would venture to say that the Mishnah Berurah that we mentioned before previously is more mashma like the Shulchan Aruch Harav, not like the Kaf HaChaim, because the Mishnah Berurah had said that putting that thin layer of oil on the spit or things like that don't take its nature. And that over there, that he doesn't specify that it's not tafeach amanas lapiach. That's not enough to leave a residue. It's just that you need to have an amount. So an amount of oil, which the poskim are indicating that means like it's more like deep frying. Deep frying doesn't sound at all like the Kaf HaChaim is saying, and I think the ruach of the poskim is much more like the Shulchan Aruch Harav, that you need to have a serious amount of oil there to be considered bishul and not need libun. Okay, now, like we mentioned, the cholent pot. So Rabbi Yashiv says that since for the most part, cholent does dry up. I guess it really depends on you and how you use it. But in those days, he wasn't talking about really a crock pot. Rabbi Yashiv had a regular pot on the fire with cholent in it, and it's on a real fire. So I guess by then it would, for the most part, always dry up. So he says that such a pot would need libun kal. on the pot for Pesach, for chametz. And Nissim Karelitz, however, says that it's not misyavish legamrei, and it still keeps lachluchas in it, like the story we mentioned before. So he holds that it's enough to do hagala on it. And it's a little bit of a kasha on Rav Elyashiv that it's hard to imagine that even his chont would not end up with any lachluchas. And it's Mefurish Mishnah Berurah that we just quoted before, Sifyat Aleph, that's enough that even if it mostly dried out, as long as it started wet, started as a liquidy thing, and it still retains lachluchas, that should be enough. So it's a little bit of kasha on Rav Elyashiv, and the Mishnah Berurah is mashma more like a Nissim Karelitz. So that the minhag olam is more to even a chont pot would be to do hagala on it, not libun. Okay, in Sifyat Beis, we're talking about the hand. This is really a very intense discussion, which I really don't want to get too much into, but the Mishnah Berurah and Sifkat and Samach discusses the halacha of if the halacha of. Are we here? 1 second. I'm sorry. Yeah, in Samach. The handles that are connected by nails. I'm trying to find it here. I'm not finding it inside right now. It's one of these pieces here. Not finding it inside. The discussion of, we'll look back over and find it inside, where he talks about the question of handles that are connected by nails. There's a question here in halacha of cham ktsaso cham kulo. Do we say that if it's absorbed in part of the cleat, is it spread to the rest of the cleat? Do you have to kasha the whole cleat? So in the Shutrat Vaz, and it's brought down in the Marsham, that if handles are attached by nails or screws, they're considered one kli. And if we say cham ktsaso cham kulo, that it spreads throughout one kli, then it turns it into one kli. Rabbi Kiveger and Chassam Sofer, and also the Minchas Yitzchak and Rabbi Elyashiv, I'll go like those poskim to say that it is considered two kelim. So even though it's attached by nails, but it's not the same kli, and to spread from one kli to the next, we know that if we touch two pots together from the outside, even though they're both boiling on the inside, so the klal is in your idea that two pots that touch each other, when they're dry, then there's nothing passes from one to the other. So therefore, all this post can take on that when it's attached by nails or screws or whatever, then many pots are like that they have like an immovable bolt that can't come out that was put there forever, but it's still two separate pieces, and that we don't say cham ktsaso cham kulo. Nevertheless, the poskim all say that one should kasha the whole thing, including the handle, if it's a metal handle, because nitzotzos, because you have splattering that does go on, and from the splattering, there could be bolea, and therefore it still needs a gala. Okay. Skipping a little bit further to a lot of things in the Maisa, but we can't really talk about everything. In Sif Chaf, so there we talk about the shulchanos and tables and certain kinds of boxes that they used to put their pots in. They would say over there that they use them the whole year. Then the regulus is to pour boiling water on them, and because sometimes soup and things like that fall onto these tables. And the Maisa, the Mishnah Berurah and Kufya Daled brings a machlokas whether or not it's enough to have irui to pour boiling water over these things, or you need to come on to what we spoke before about the Evan Meluban, to have the heated up stone, which we'll call that a portable hagala going on, because the idea is that usually when you pour from a boiling, let's say, pot, that's called irui, that's called just pouring, and it cools down on the way, and when it hits this stone, then it doesn't allow it to cool down. So it retains the koach of real hagala as opposed to iri. So that he brings, that's a machlokes. The Sharat Sion in Ois Kuf Mem Dalid says that, that Meikar Din, he goes, again, he keeps on doing this throughout the Mishnah Berurah, goes back to Rov Tashmisho. That since there's a strong kula over here to say that it's enough to pour Be'irui, because the amount of times that you would ever actually have something that's a davar gush or whatever put onto the counter surface or onto the table is going to be certainly a miyut tashmisho. Rov tashmisho is always going to be at the most irui, and if even that, it's not even that common, but it's common enough things spritz there and everything like that. But if something spritzes from the pot onto a counter, then it's not going to be coming directly from the pot. It's going to be with nifsaka kiluach. It's not going to have a direct kiluach, a direct stream coming from the pot, but it's going to be spritzing in the air, and whatever hits the pot at that point hits the counter will be considered irui, and not and not directly from the Kli Rishon. So there's a strong reason then to be samach on Rov Tashmisho to say that it's enough to do irui on these things and not to need real hagala. That's, I think, the minig of most. I know myself, I've always not been choshesh for having to do a real hagala on the countertops, but rather to pour boiling water onto them and be samach on irui. They say over here also that a post can say in the Aruch HaShulchan that if you have certainly even if you have a serious reason to think that you did put, let's say, davar gush on there, but if it's an expensive tabletop and by pouring boiling water over it, you're going to destroy it or ruin it or it's going to warp or something like that. So then the Aruch HaShulchan there again goes back to, like we keep saying, Rov Tashmisho, that Rov of its use is certainly not that way, and therefore you can kasher it in like any normal table that you eat on. So when you put hot surfaces things down, you usually put it on a towel or something. If you ever do put a pot down on it, but usually you just put a bowl or something, a soup, or that'd be the hottest thing, and it goes on it, and that's already in a kli sheni or shlishi, so it does not belay at all. So it's enough just to really clean the table off with a good with a soap or something, and wash it off with water, and it's already kosher at that point. And anyway, the minig Yisrael is for Pesach to cover these things, and for the rest of the year, so it's even more kal for the rest of the year. Pesach is more chamer, and then even Shari Surim for that. And Rabbi Yashiv, who is pretty machmer in these things, he's the one who said that the table you're not rugged to put, to actually put pots onto the table. So he says that you don't need hagala at all. All you need to do is just to clean it, which is, he says as well, like in the refrigerator or in the cupboards in the kitchen. So he says that people cover them just as mitam minhag, but there's no real halacha even to cover them, to put the papers down. Just more like a haggis Yisrael kadoshim, but it does not even include to do that. Okay. I guess, when it comes to countertops, Pesach-wise, probably not for the rest of the year, but Pesach-wise, a reason to maybe be more machmer, at least to do irui, or a place there might be a chashash of davar gush might be if you put down if you take straight out of the oven, if you would put an actual piece of pizza right out of the oven, or a piece of toast out of the toaster oven when it's still very, very hot, and you put it right onto the countertop, that would be an example of a davar gush that's put on there that we have to be more machmer to. There would be more of a reason to steam it or to use a Evan Meluban onto it. But again, we can go back. We can rely on Rov Tashmisho. The rov of the use of the countertop is not for that. When it comes to kashering on microwave, which very ties into this particular halacha, and it's one of these other surfaces, which is a big suffix in halacha, exactly what its status is, but it does get to the very high heats. So we have many different sheets among the poskim how to kasher microwave. The minig in America, for the most part, is like Rabbi Moshe. Rabbi Yashiv holds you really can't do this at all. Rabbi Yashiv holds you have to like fill it up with boiling water. It's a whole mesa. But Rabbi Moshe holds that it's brought down in his name. Rabbi Shimon Eider in Sefer Nechos Pesach brings down from Moshe that to kasher the actual microwave, it's enough since it got absorbed to begin with through steam. It doesn't really have its own heat coming out of the walls, but it's really all absorbed through steam because of the chemical reaction that it causes in the food. It steams up and goes from the food into the walls as opposed to from the heat of the walls itself. So Kabbalah Kachpolta, the way it absorbed, that's the way that we get it out. And the same steam that brought it in will also take it out. So we take a couple cups of hot water until they put it onto the glass surface, and from there, to until it steams, the water steams out, so it empties out of the cups, and you assume there was enough steam there to clean the whole thing out. But one of my friends pointed out to me today from Kashrus Agency that applies only to the walls, but that does not apply to the main use of the wall. The walls don't really have that much absorbed into them directly, but the glass plate that turns around, that glass plate that often people do. I personally never did this, but he said that most people do. When no one's looking, they'll take a piece of cake or they'll put something down onto the actual glass plate that turns around without any other surface in between, or things spill over all the time onto it. So for that glass plate is not enough to just rely on the steam, but one should actually do a real hagala to actually put that into boiling water before using that for Pesach or even for the rest of the year if you're taking a tray from microwave and you're kashering it. We'll talk about a few different surfaces. In Sif Chaf Gimel, it's not really within the purview of our discussion today. It's going to be a longer discussion. Maybe some other time we can talk about it. We find the opportunity to really go into the question of China, and maybe I'll try to leave this for. We're going to have Mitzvah Shem one more year to finish off the subject, so I'll make a note of it to. Make a note for myself to be able to just give you guys a sikkum for the next year on all the different shilas that come up with China. There are a couple different shilas with China, which maybe we'll get to a little bit at the end. Which it's negiyah to Pesach, it's negiyah to the whole year, especially negiyah. It's very, very commonly asked by Baalei Tshuva who have family heirloom from their grandmother. They have an old set of china which wasn't kosher, and it's sat for the last year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years and never been used. And are they allowed to, in some way, use that china? I wasn't planning to talk about that now. Will throw out that it is a huge machlokes of poskim. One of the sirufim over here is the shita, the Chacham Tzvi, which is brought down in the Chacham Tzvi is a one-line shita, which it's mentioned in the Piskei Tshuva in Yoredea Kuf Chaf Beis Sifkat and Gimel, where he has a sword to say that in certain situations that after a year, no taste remains left at all. There's such thing as Nosan Tam Lefgam, or Machmir Nosan Tam Lefgam. We have a klal, the Gemara says in Avodah Zorah, Ayin Vav, that even a kli that is, even though Nosan Tam Lefgam will not aser anything, if I cook, if a pot was not used within 24 hours and it's clean, even if it was used the treif, if you cook food in it now, it will not aser that food because Nosan Tam Lefgam doesn't aser the food. However, we're still not allowed to cook in that pot because it's a gzera atu ben yomo. If you use a klisha ain't a ben yomo, you might come to use a klisha that is a ben yomo within 24 hours and it will aser the food. And that's a gzera of Chazal. So the Chacham Tzvi says there's a tzad in the Chacham Tzvi, not everybody agrees with, many poskim can disagree, but he has a tzad to say that is only true within 12 months. That within 12 months, it's still Nosan Tam Lefgam. Once it gets past 12 months, it's not that within 12 months there was a taste. The taste got nifgam. It got soured a little bit, or it's not as strong as it used to be. But after 12 months, then he has a tzad to say that there's no tam left at all. The tam is completely evaporated from there. Nothing left at all. So it's a sforim of chodeshes. Not everybody agrees with it. Ramosha has a tshuva. Ramosha's tshuva is, let me find it here. I believe it's in Yordei Chelik Beis. Ramosha is Yordei Chelik Beis. I don't see right offhand where it is. I know it's in Yordei Chelik Beis. That Ramosha there is discussing porcelain. I'm sorry, yes, it's Yordei Chelik Beis Siman Mem Vav in Ramosha. And he's talking about the Mishnah Berurah. It's the very last Mishnah Berurah in the Siman, the very, very last line in the Siman. He talks about Kli Porphyry, Shakorin Porceli, which is porcelain. Didn't Kli Cheres Yesh Lahem below Kli Skuchis. The Mishnah Berurah says, just straight out, it's considered a Kli Cheres and not a Kli Skuchis. So Kli Skuchis, we have different sheets about, which we'll talk in a minute. But a Kli Cheres is a Kli Cheres. And porcelain is actually made out of a type of a clay, which is fired at a very high heat, 2,500 degrees, I forgot exactly how many degrees, very high heat, and it causes a type of a glaze. But be'etzim, it's really a Kli Cheres, says the Mishnah Berurah. So, but it's very common that you can have very expensive sets of porcelain, and that shaila comes up about, and this shaila was actually brought to Moshe in that tshuva about a Baal Tshuva family and trying to carve them, and it's very hard for them to part from this set of porcelain that came from through the family. So Moshe makes 3 tanoim to allow this. He allows it under 3 conditions. Number 1, that they were not used for 12 months. And with the not using 12 months, then you have the sphora of the chacham tzvi, that it has no taste in it left at all, which the sphora that would be that even though the Torah testifies, the Gemara says, Torah idal kli cheres ein tamo yotze mimenu la'olam midofni la'olam, that the tam doesn't leave its walls forever. That's only when there is tam there to leave. But with the Sfor L'cham Tzvi, there is no time there left to leave. It evaporates. It's like, in a way, sort of like we said by Libun last time, that Libun is different than Hagala when it comes to Kli Cheres, because Libun doesn't take it out of the walls, which it doesn't come out of the walls. It burns it where it is in the walls until there's nothing left. So the 12 months in the corner of the Sfor L'cham Tzvi also does something similar to that it just destroys its taste wherever it is, and there's nothing left at all. And that's number 2. It's Hesed Meruba, like it's an expensive set. It's not just something you can throw away. It's something that really means a lot to them. Number 3, there has to be a sort of Takanas Hashavim. That has to be that people that are coming Baal Tshuva, and this is going to help them. We find a lot of kulas in Chazal in many ways, even for more serious things when it comes to Takanas Hashavim, which is it's a catchphrase for things that we do to try to allow people or enable people or make it easier for them to become Baal Tshuva. So the sforas of Takanas Hashavim, but seer of all these other sforas, that Ramosha is willing to allow it, with one last stipulation that you do Hagala Shalosh Pamim, that you actually 3 times do Hagala with each plate. You put it 3 times into boiling water. Where does that come from? That's a separate discussion. So, but that's the Psak Ramosha when it comes to those sets of dishes. And again, this is only for the rest of the year, not for Pesach. They cannot be used for Pesach even in those conditions, because of the tzad of Kli Cheres, even the Cham Tzvi would not be mekel for Pesach. Now, with regards to Sifcha Vav, with regards to glass. So just to speak briefly about glass, that the Shulchan Aruch says that Kli Skuchis afilu machnisan l'kiyum afilu mishtamish b'mchamin, even if it's used with hot, ein tzrichim shum hechsher she'enim bolim u'shtifa ba'am l'sagadu. That's the psak of the Mechaber. That glass doesn't need any hagala at all. You could just wash it, and since it doesn't absorb at all, the Mechaber paskas that glass does not absorb, and therefore you can use it for Pesach even just by washing it. And the Ramah says, "Hagah yesh machmirim va'omrim dekli skuchis afilu hagala lamani lehu." V'chen minig ba'Ashkenaz, Medinas Elu. That the minig in Ashkenaz and in the Medinas and the Ramah, like in Krakow and Poland, is that even Hagala doesn't even help. So what's the Nukudas Machlokas? What's the Machlokas based on over here? So the Maisa in the Beis Yosef over here on the spot in Taftan Aleph, he brings a major Machlokas Rishonim that the Hagos Simonios and the Mordechai say in the name of Rabbeinu Yechiel that Klis Chuches, glass, since it is made by melting down sand, and sand is like a type of ground, therefore the Rabbeinu Yechiel holds that it has a din of Kli Cheres, which Kli Cheres we know there's no way to do Hagala on a Kli Cheres at all. But he says in the name of the Ravya, however, the opposite. He says that there's a svora of Shia. Shia means that it's smooth. And we find this a mokah for this in the Gemara speaks about different types of meat that are bolea, and it says that leiv in a bolea de Shia, the heart of an animal is not bolea because it's Shia, it's very smooth, and things just like bounce off of it rather than absorb into it. So the svora of Shia, he wants the Ravya wants to apply also to Kli Schuchis, that they're so the surface is so not absorbent that it just bounces off like it says by the Shia. The Beis Yosef brings many others that hold like the Ravya, including the Chuvas Rashba and many others. And so therefore that's the Psak of the Shulchan Aruch, and that's the meaning of the Sfardim, is to look at Kli Schuchis as something which is not boleh at all, and all it needs is shtifa. But the Ramah is going like the Shittas Rabbeinu Yechiel, and takes on that the minig Ashkenaz is not to kasher it. Now within that, the Taz and the Magen Avraham both say that b'diavad we can be matir like the Dasa Shulchan Aruch because many probably Rov Rishonim hold that way, not like Rabbeinu Yechiel. So b'diavad there's what to rely on. Just the Pri Megadim is Mendayak that there's a machlokas between the Taz and the Magen Avraham what b'diavad means. According to the Magen Avraham, so that we say it's mutter b'diavad. That's only if you do Hagala on it. B'diavad we're matter if you do Hagala, then we can be matter the Kli Schuchis. The Taz, when it says matter b'diavad, it means like the Shulchan Aruch, that it's mutter even without Hagala. Because the b'diavad is that it doesn't need Hagala, that it's like it's Shia and it's not like a Kli Cheres at all. So it means to rely on the Shulchan Aruch b'diavad, and that's also the Shita of the Pri Chadash, which we know is one of the key poskim. It's brought down in the Sharat Zion's Ois Kuf Tzadik Vav to paskin legamre like the Shulchan Aruch b'diavad. Well, he holds anyway. He holds like he just paskins anyway like the Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't pass like the Ramah. The Pri Chadash, not even b'diavad. He just paskins that way. Period. So the Sharat Zion there says in that spot right there in Kuf Tzadik Vav on our page here, it says that it's difficult to rely on this Pri Chadash because many Achronim copied the Magen Avraham L'Halacha, the Ashkenazi poskim, obviously. And there's also a Ritva in the name of the Ra'ah that also says like Rabbeinu Yechiel. So, therefore, he says that Al Kol Panim, without Hagala, one should not be mekel even b'diavad. That's what he writes. That's what he says in the Sharat Zion. However, in the Mishnah Berurah and Kuf Nun Hey, he writes that in a place of Hefsed Meruba, if there's a great loss involved, then we can be mekel even b'chamin, even if it's hot, and also if it's after me'es la'es. As long as it's the Pri Megadim wants to say that you can be mekel to rely on the Shulchan Aruch b'diavad even toch me'es la'es. But he says that far he doesn't want to go, but he's willing to say that makom Hefsed Meruba, that we could be somewhat on the Dasa Shulchan Aruch after me'es la'es. So it comes out halacha l'maisa that by Kli Schuchis, it's a tremendous machlokas in poskim, and we have boils down, no pun intended, it boils down to a machlokas of Sfardim and Ashkenazim, and then we have a machlokas of poskim what the din of b'diavad is. So, but as everyone knows, that the minig of Ashkenazim is certainly not to use Kli Schuchis for the rest of the year for Pesach. but we certainly do kasher klis kuchis for, even from treif, we kasher klis kuchis for from treif to kosher. If someone bought something in a garage sale or whatever, it's real glass, then many poskim say that one should kasher it 3 times. I haven't found a really, really good source in Chazal for the 3 times, but that's what many poskim say, to kasher it 3 times to make it from treif to kosher. With regards to plastic, kashering plastic, so that we have 3 shittas in the poskim. The Minchas Yitzchak holds that, it was interesting, he's usually very quite machmer in these type of things, that that you're allowed to kasher it even for Pesach. Plastic can be kashered even for Pesach. And unless there's a chash that it's a type of plastic you're afraid you might ruin it if you get it too hot, then we're worried that you're not going to kasher it properly. If you're not worried about it, then it would work even for Pesach. Ramosha holds that we cannot kasher plastic for Pesach, but you could kasher plastic for the rest of the year from treif. Even from treif or from basar or chalav, we could kasher plastic for the rest of the year. And Rabbi Yashiv and Mr. Karelitz and Rav Osner hold that you can't kasher plastic at all. But I'm knowing to paskin, people ask the shaila based on the way Rav Hirsch is knowing, like his Rabbi Rav Moshe, to go the in-between shita like Rav Moshe, that we could kasher plastic for the rest of the year, but we cannot kasher it for Pesach. Rav Yoshev and Rav Osner that are machmir in general, they're moda that if it was only used as a klisheni, then you could kasher it. Now, with regards to rubber, if you have kelim that are made out of rubber, so Rav Moshe has a tshuva in Orach Chaim Chelik Beis Siman Tzadik Beis, that if it's true rubber from a rubber tree, which is not that common today, because things are so much chemical, in synthetic. But if it's real rubber from a rubber tree, then Rav Moshe holds that Hagala does help. But if it's he says, and even if there might be some mixture of some chemicals in it, we're not worried about that because we'll have to after rubo. If it's rubo, the majority of it is real rubber, then Hagala does help. But if it's a kli from one of the new chemical, synthetic materials, that Rav Moshe holds that we don't really know what it is, and Hagala doesn't help. So I guess one might ask on that, it was bothering me that why should that be any different than the fact that Rav Moshe himself paskin you could kasher plastic, and the plastics are all types of synthetics. They're not anything real. They're synthetics. But I think probably maybe the svara would be that plastics are hard and rubber is soft. So probably the chazaka of a synthetic soft material, it gives a chazaka of being like a klicheres, because it's soft and it's bolea. And unless you know otherwise, we have to assume that it's not kasherable. We'll consider like a klicheres. Masha'enken, a hard plastic, which its chazaka is that it's not, since it's hard, that it's not bolea, then or not bolea to that extent, that certainly Hagala will help with it. Going to Teflon, we already mentioned this in the last year, that if you have a Teflon frying pan, so then maybe the Teflon itself, theoretically, if you only cooked with it with water, let's say, if you know that you always use this frying pan with either deep frying or you fill it with water, and there are many types of Teflon coated deep trays that people use for things. So since they're always used with an amount of water or oil, then Hagala would help, and Teflon is no worse than any other plastic. However, so you can kasher for the rest of the year, just not for Pesach. However, if our frying pans today, the Teflon coated frying pans, since we mentioned last time, it's only a thin layer of oil that's put into it, and therefore it doesn't have a din of machbas and sifyat aleph. Rather, it has a din of tashmish al gavi eish. It needs libun, not Hagala, and there's no way to do libun on Teflon without destroying it, so it's not possible to kasher it. Okay. Now we mentioned before that the whole shaila we mentioned before about glass all the different study we said about glass, was for Pesach. There's a different discussion about glass when it comes to Shari Isurim, to other Isurim. There's a Pri Megadim that says in the name of the Knesset Gdola and the Minchas Yaakov, two of the Gdolei Achronim, that only on Pesach we're machmir. Even the Ashkenazim that are machmir only for Pesach because of the chumrah of chametz. And that's the psak of the Minchas Yitzchak, we could use glass for Shari Surim, like I mentioned before. You buy something in the garage sale, whatever. You could kasher it through Hagala. It came from a goyim. You can kasher it with Hagala. And the Minchas Yitzchak says it not for the reason we said before. The Minchas Yitzchak adds a noose for him. He says that only on Pesach, if we're machmir, let's say if somebody has a glass set, and if we're machmir that he can't use it for Pesach, he's not going to have a total loss of this kli because he can use it for the rest of the year. It's not a problem. Masha Enkin, if we're going to be machmir for the rest of the year, it's going to be a hefsed for the bailam. There's nothing to do with it. It has to be thrown away. And since it's a makom hefsed now, so we're allowed to go back and be samach on the Shulchan Aruch that holds the glass is not boleh at all, and that's really the Ikra din. The Ramah that's machmir is only a chumrah. The Ikra din is really the Shulchan Aruch, because Rov Rishonim hold like the Rav Yah, like the Chuvas Rashba, that glass doesn't absorb at all, and therefore in a case where it's going to be a hefsed, you can lose out completely. That's the svara why we're makel the rest of the year to kasher it as opposed to Pesach. So certainly can kasher the glass. Just I mentioned that many say that you should do it 3 times. With regards to Pyrex, with regards to Pyrex, so Rav Yashiv says an interesting chiddush. He wants to say that Pyrex is basically hardened glass. So Pyrex for Pesach, it's very interesting that Rav Yashiv is actually mekel. You could kasher Pyrex for Pesach, because he says that the Ramah says we don't kasher glass is only mitam minhag. He says nahagu lahachmir. We see that it's not really a psak lahachmir, it's a minhag lahachmir, and you can only say the minhag applies to something that existed at the time of the Ramah, which is regular glass. But the hardened glass, like Pyrex, didn't exist in his time, and therefore the minhag doesn't apply. But that's the shita of Rav Yashiv. It's very interesting. He's being mekel, but Rav Moshe is usually the opposite. Rav Moshe is the mekel, and Rav Yashiv is the machmir. In this case, Rav Yashiv is the mekel, Rav Moshe is the machmir, and Rav Vosner as well. And also, it's brought down in the name of the Maram Brisk, one of the earlier great poskim, that not that early, but they all hold that Pyrex is the same as glass, and therefore the minhag Ashkenazim is not to kasher it for Pesach. That's our minhag as well. We don't kasher Pyrex for Pesach. Today was prevalent the glass stovetops, which cover the stove. We spoke about those some time ago with regards to that does not consider the eish gara for katum gamashia v'chazara because it's stationary there, so it's normal. It's not considered out of the ordinary. And when it comes to kashering it, so Rosh Zaman is brought in the name of Rosh Zaman Arbach. That's all that. It's not enough to do hagala on it. It actually needs libun, because it's used directly on the fire, and things often, he uses a lesson that it's things spill betadirus. Things always are spritzing and spilling out of the pots onto them, and therefore they need libun. So you see that Rosh Zaman is holding that if it needs libun, that we don't consider it that it's whatever falls in there is immediately burnt up and gone. It's there and it absorbs in the glass. And if we're choshish that glass does absorb, according to the tzad, that Ashkenazim or machmir, the glass does absorb, and kasher for Pesach, the only way to kasher it would be with libun. And libun is the heat that you get by just turning the stove on with its normal heat. That is not considered libun. So we have to find some other way of libun, or there's really no way to kasher for Pesach. The Ramah over here says that talks about the glaze. It goes on to the kalim, and so the glaze is considered like glass. and therefore if the glaze is in the inside, so again it goes back to Ashkenazim and Sephardim, the glaze is in the inside of the kli, it can't be kashered for Pesach. It's on the outside, then it's probably there just for decoration, and for decoration, especially a kli that has it for decoration, it's a higher level kli, then you probably never used it for so hot to begin with, so then the glass on the outside is not ma'akev, it's not going to ma'akev the kasher it for Pesach. Okay, that sort of completes the Nekudas Halacha L'Maaseh we're going to speak out for Tafnin and Aleph. Mirz Hashem will have one more short shir to try to cover, we'll see how short it'll be, but relatively short shir, just to cover some points in Tafnin Beis, and that will complete the sugya. I'll try Mirz Hashem in the beginning of this coming week to do that, to finish that off, and then when the Bechina, which I realize we're already getting to the summer season, so it's, I don't expect that to be right away. I know everyone's busy, but if I get the Bechina out, then that can just be something to review and to have by the end of August, so we can, before we go on to the next subject in the fall, Mirz Hashem. So I'll hopefully get that out for you soon as well, so you can have it for you wherever you are in the summer, and then we'll also. We mentioned that we're going to have the summer limud itself will be out of the Sefer Kashas of Rabbi Forst, and it's too big of a Sefer to do the entire Sefer over the summer like we did last time, but we'll try to pick some areas, and then we'll get the schedule and Mirz Hashem out to you sometime soon of which prakim and a timeline from next week till the end of August, Mirz Hashem. So best regards to everybody. It was again wonderful to have everybody here. It seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't so long ago. But we still are with the geschmack and the simcha of having everybody here was really wonderful. I just want to end off with one point in Hashkafa, what's going on over here. We have Shiv Asar Tammuz coming up this coming Sunday. We have a 3-week period in which there's a lot to think about, and people have a lot of trouble also connecting to this. I think that one point we can take out of it that is important, and knowing this also, especially with all that's going on in the world today, the amount of anti-Semitism that's on the rise in campuses and throughout the world, and in the hallowed halls of the UN and the so-called Human Rights Council and so on and so forth, that have nothing at all to do than to talk about Israel, and which is just a code word for talking about the Jews. And it's thinly veiled, if veiled at all, anti-Semitism that's just been on the rise in the world. It's something that we have to notice and we can't forget, and we shouldn't brush under the carpet. I think that this is a longer arichos, and maybe we'll take a separate shir if everybody's interested to talk about this more by arichos. I'll just briefly speak out that the Tisha B'Av is called a moed, and it's a very strange ikra lai moed. It says in the beginning of Eicha that ikra lai moed lishbor bachurai. So it's a moed to smash my bachrim, which means that it's a very negative moed, but it's a moed. It's to the extent that we don't say tachnun because of that, because it's called a moed. And where do we ever find a moed without nisim? This is the greatest time at Hester Panim. Every moed. The word moed means from the word asher yivoyed l'chashama. This is where Moshe Shapira pointed out that a moed is that place of meeting, and a place of meeting comes through nisim. All our moedim are through nisim. Pesach starts it off, and everything else. Zecher l'yetzias Mitzrayim. A nes, the word nes means to be elevated. Laharim al nes. In other psukim, to be elevated up, and the way we're elevated through a nes to connect to Hashem at a higher level, and that's why it's a moed. It's a place, it's a meeting. We get elevated, and we have to connect to Hashem through that elevated state through the nisim. And that's the essence of a moed. How is it possible to have a moed without nisim? So Moshe explained, Moshe Shapira, that the Gemara in Dalet Beis and Yuma says that it says in pasuk in Eicha that kol mechabdea hiziluha legalus ervasa. All those that did honor Klal Yisrael now are mizalzel in it in order to reveal its erva. in the Gemara darshans that pasuk on that Nebuchadnezzar went in and took out the two kruvim that were embracing each other. He took it out and said, "This nation is supposed to be so holy, and this is what they do. They put a zachar and a keva and together it's like in a bedroom in their holy place." And everyone made fun of them. And that was Megala Ervasan. That was revealed the nakedness of the Jews for their averas. So without going by Richos, how could it be that those two kruvim were embracing each other if the Gemara in Baba Basra says that the barometer of the connection between Shem and Klal Yisrael was the two kruvim, even though there were no moving parts, miraculously the kruvim would embrace each other if we are in a good situation, and if we move away from Hashem, then they move apart. Miraculous. That was a nes kavu in the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara in Nundalam and Aleph in Yuma says that when the Oli Regel came 3 times a year, they would open up the parochas all the way through. People would see, and they would see ruach chibasim l'fiyamakam. They would see that they're embracing each other. We would see our belovedness before Hashem. That was the spitz of our connection was shown through the two kruvim. And if we turned the other way, then it would turn as away. The one representing Hashem, the Zachar, would turn away from the Nekeva. How could it be that those two were embracing at this time, the time of the Korban? Says the Ritva, B'Shem Rabbo, it was a nes lara. It was a nes b'toch nes. That Hashem, nes, it was a nes lara legalis ervasan. Hashem performed a negative nes in order to reveal their nakedness. The Ritva is telling us a new concept in Nisim, such thing as a nes lara. Similarly, in Baisheni, that was Bais Rishon. In Baisheni, the Gemara says in Gittin that Titus, when Titus went in to the Kaddish HaKadoshim, he opened a Sefer Torah, Rahman al-Islam, and took a harlot, did an avera on it, and then he took his sword and he pierced the parochas that was between the Kaddish HaKadoshim and the Heichal. And the Gemara says that Dam poured out. The Chas v'Shalom Kiviyachol killed Hashem. So why such a thing happened? It was a nes that Hashem showed to show Klal Yisrael that we had actually severed the connection between Elyonim and Tachtonim. The Kaddish Kadashim represented the Olam Elyon, and the Heichal represents the Olam Tachton. And the connecting point between the two is the parochas. So to have blood pouring out of the parochas shows that Klal Yisrael severed that connection between Elyonim and Tachtonim that was in the Beis Hamikdash. And that again was a nes lara. It was a negative nes to show the state of Klal Yisrael. A negative nes, a nes lara. It's a new musag, a concept of nes. But how is that not a steer minei obey? How is that not an inherent contradiction to have a nes lara if every nes elevates us? And the answer is, on the contrary, that even a nes lara, if we're able to see that Hashem's hands are with us, even in the worst case, the worst situations, then that, seeing that Hashem is with us, that itself is the elevation. Realizing that what's going on is beyond Derech HaTeva, that's what elevates us. And Rav Moshe compared it to what the Gemara says in Chagiga, that Rav Yeshua ben Hananiah, I believe, was in the house of the Kesar, in the palace of the Kesar. See? Yeah. It was in the house of the Kesar, and Apikoros said to him, like, what are you people? Your master has turned his face from you. Like he's left you. So what's the point of you being Jewish? So he stretched his hand out and motioned to the referring to the pasuk that says that Od Yado Natuya Aleinu. His hand is still extended upon us. So ask the Marsha in Chagiga, that's Daf Hayam at Beis, Hayam at Aleph or Beis, I think it's Hayam at Beis. Ask the Marsha that statement of Od Yado Natuya Aleinu was said for the negative, that Hashem is performing onshim in Klal Yisrael, not good things. So that reinforces the statement of the Apikoros. What was he answering him? Answers of Beis Levi that with a steer on halacha, an apparent steer on halacha. The Gemara Bab Metzia says that if you take your kiss and you lay it in the Rishus Harabim, then it becomes hefker. Even if you say that you want it to remain yours, whatever, but you put it in an unidentifiable kiss in the middle of Rishus Harabim, then no matter what you say, it is hefker. And anyone who wants to take it or burn it, whatever, they could take it or they're not liable for anything. affect the Beis Halevi that the Gemara says in Bava Kama that if somebody takes a kli, stand on your roof, and I want to throw a glass down onto the sidewalk and smash it, and someone else comes along when it's in midair and takes a baseball bat and smashes it halfway, he has to pay the owner for smashing it. Why? Why is that any different than laying it in the Rosh Hashanah? You threw it down, it's going to be smashed momentarily. You obviously don't care about it. Says the Beis Halevi, no, it's very, very different. When I put something in the street, then I just don't care, period. I rendered it ownerless. It's hefker. But if just like I can use a glass to drink from, if I want to break that glass, that's my prerogative with my glass to break it if I want to, if I have a good reason to do that. So if that person throws it down to break it, it's still his, and he did not give up his ownership. He is the owner to break it. His mind is not taken off of it, it's on it to break it. So it says the Beis Halevi, what the Apikoros was asking Shubin Chani was that you are, your owner, your master has taken his mind off of you. He's left you. You're hefker. So what shaykhus, what connection do you have anymore? He answered back, no. Od yodu natuya aleinu. His hand is still upon us. He might be performing negative things, but it shows that he didn't forget about us. He cares about us. It's a lot like a child will much rather have his parent angry at him than have his parent forget about him or not care about him. So that's what Moshe said. That Yesod of the Beis Halevi is what the Ritva is telling us. There's a nes l'ra. You see that there's nisim going on in the ra. It might be the ra, but you see the nes. You see that Hashem is connected, and that is our elevation. We're elevated through that. Which that nes l'ra is what turns a Yom Kippur. Turns a Tisha B'av in 3 weeks into a time of nisim. Not the nisim we'd like to see, but nisim nevertheless. And I think it's not al chinam. The fact it's known that the day that Tisha B'av falls out is the same day always of the week that Pesach falls out, which is a remez. I think that Pesach is a time of Nisim Gluyan. That's why it's in the month of Nisan, and we also have a type of Nisim Gluyan going on in Chodesh Av as well. But no less of a nes, because anti-Semitism at the level that is has no explanation whatsoever. Al pi derech hateva. Moshe Shapiro said once that if you take the sum total of all the explanations given by all of the sociologists and the historians and all the scholars to explain anti-Semitism, all of it together might add up to 5% of what's really going on. But how do you understand the other 95%? How do you understand possibly in any human way that the entire nation, one of the most technologically advanced nations of the world, would use all their technology to perform a genocide on a people, even to the cost of them losing a war, and the rest of the world join in with them? How do you understand that? Suicide bombers. How do we understand pogroms and inquisitions and things that throughout that the entire world is fixated on nothing but the Jewish people, to the point that the Human Rights Council, so-called Human Rights Council, has Provision 7 on the books. It's a law in that council. It's part of their bylaws. That Provision 7, paragraph 7, which says that every single time that body meets, that international body meets, part of the meeting has to be a discussion about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Every other conflict in the world is part of paragraph or provision 4, which means that there's a reason to talk about it, you talk about it. If not, you don't. But in paragraph 7, there has to be a discussion about Israel and the Palestinians every single time. And the list goes on and on and on, which makes no sense. There's no way to explain it except for Od yodu natuya aleinu. It's a nes l'ra, and we're able to see Kadosh Baruch Hu as no less than we see Hashem in the splitting of the sea. We see Hashem with us, that He never left us, and He's always with us in this way as well. So we should be zocheh to see it in a more positive way. And Mitzvah Hashem Tisha B'av, it's in Chodesh Av, which means father, which means that all that's going on, it's hinting to us that it's happening not because He doesn't care about us, but because He's our father. Chodesh Av, Chodesh Nisan for Pesach, time of Nisan, Chodesh Av for Tisha B'av, the time that despite everything we know, we have a father. We have a father there, and we should see Him, Yirtzeh Hashem, both in Goloi, in a positive way, B'karav B'Har V'Yameinu. Kol Tov.